Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and back to Lee Anderson's conference with Richard Tice. And this is just shortly after Lee Anderson joins the Reform Party. And apparently this video is called Moody Lee Anderson has a pop at journalist in Unhinged Reform UK press conference. So, as I said before, ladies and gentlemen, maybe my comments about referring to Lee Anderson as Benito Mussolini was maybe a little bit not 100% accurate, maybe not 100% fair, or maybe there are some people who would make the comparison, but, well, I'd say, ladies and gentlemen, the measure of a man is by how he handles defeat. And before anybody jumps on the bandwagon, I'll just say this. Lee Anderson, if he wants to accept defeat, if he wants for this to go anywhere, then he's got to succeed at this. Because anyone could just look at this and say that if Lee Anderson or anybody else that joins the Reform Party for that matter, and they don't actually make any of the changes they want, or they don't even split up the hard-right division in the Conservative Party, then you may be arguing, well, what exactly has the Reform Party actually reformed? What have they actually brought forward? Well, unless they can actually bring anything forward or demonstrate anything that's worth following their example in any way towards the ideas of reform through net zero migration and everything else, you can immediately associate or possibly even come to the conclusion that all that the Reform Party have done is simply try to ignore the fact that all the criticisms around them are starting to become a little bit more clearer. But that's just my 2 cents about this. So let's see. And because I know a lot of people have also suggested the idea that all I did was insult Lee Anderson and that I felt like that was too stupid to know the difference. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, there is a slight art to being ignorant or to being a little bit stupid about some things. Because you know what the greatest thing is that when you are stupid, is that you have one of two options. The first is that, well, you can learn and try and be smarter. You might not get it right on the first, second, third, or fourth, or fifth try, but it does establish trying to make an effort of sorts. Because the other option is to remain stupid and to get things factually incorrect. Now, how much this this entire conference, or from what Lee Anderson has said before to what we're going to hear him say now, how much of this revolves around things that are actually factual, well, let's find out. So here we go.
Beth, you next.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. You talked there about a lot of soul searching. You were a Labour backer, then you were a Conservative MP, now you're defecting to Reform. What do you say to people that say the problem isn't all these parties, the problem is you, and this is all about attention seeking, and this has been very disloyal to Rishi Sunak, who made you Deputy Party Chair, and also to other colleagues that have backed you very verbally in recent weeks and are probably very upset and angry with you that you're going to only hurt their chances in a general election. What's your answer to that?
So, actually, that's a very, very good question. Is that Anderson does talk a lot about soul searching, but how do you go from Labour to Conservative to Reform in the span of 30 odd years? Or is it 30 or 20 years? I'm not entirely sure. But how do you go from all of those three and you don't know what exactly? The question stands therefore, what exactly does Lee Anderson stand for? What was it that he saw in Labour that it was worth pursuing? And what was it about the Conservatives that Lee Anderson was he thought was standing for? And was it what was it about the Reform Party that was made it worth standing for? And that's by the way, ladies and gentlemen, just one thing I also want to emphasize before we go any further is that criticism is not harassment. So let's just nail that one in the bud almost immediately, because we're not harassing Lee Anderson. These are perfectly legitimate questions we need to put forward, because if Lee Anderson is saying about soul searching and he's saying he has found what he's needed in the Reform Party, then he should be able to answer this. So let's see. Let's watch.
To them. Thank you.
Country, constituency, and then party. Next question, please, Richard.
Not a good answer.
What, sorry.
No, next question.
What do you say?
Next question,
what do you
please.
say to your colleagues
I've given the answer, Beth.
who feel really let down this morning?
I've given my answer. Next question, please.
Millions of people who trusted the Tories to deliver Brexit.
Okay, so I know, again, I'm probably going to get some real stick for this, but Richard, I understand that, you know what, you've probably put yourself absolutely on the line for this as well to save your reputation by getting Lee Anderson involved. But then again, some people also told me in regards to Nigel Farage is that Lee Anderson has had years of experience in Parliament as an MP, so stop talking for him! Come on, really? I'm sorry, no, you know what, no. Time out for 1 second. If I was in Lee Anderson's position, like at that moment, I would deal with this on my own. I would not need Richard's help because I should have known fully well in my own mind about what to do in this situation. Because if you don't, then what exactly has Lee Anderson been doing for 20 odd years in politics? Guys, I'm sorry, again, this is absolute fair play because, well, let's just go back to Lee Anderson's actual answer, his response to Beth.
And what's your answer to them? Thank you.
Country, constituency, and then party. Next question.
Country, sorry, hang on.
To them. Thank you.
Country.
So his duty to his country, so we could say his duty is to his country, and that well, more from what he said in this conference is that he wants his country back. So, are we led to believe that he thinks the country is his possession, or is it in the possession of the British public? Again, this is the problem when you answer things in a bit of a vague light, because what exactly does he mean by country is again something that's a bit up for debate. Then, of course, there's constituency.
Constituency, and then.
Well, in that case, well, tell us then, Lee Anderson. Tell us what is constitutionally your rights, or based on certain ideas that the Reform Party has listed in their policies, is he referring more to the American Constitution? Is he referring to making Britain more Americanized? Is that what it is? And then party. So, one, Lee Anderson is willing to put the Reform Party in third place, and, well, you may be also wondering is Lee Anderson, again, just sort of looking out for himself by the way he says, country, as in, I want my country back. So, to the question of whether or not this whole thing was attention-seeking and whether or not the atmosphere and whatever Lee Anderson wants at the moment is only reflective in the eyes of people who think he could be of some use to, that's something that could be brought up and something that could be hinted at, like in many respects. And Lee Anderson, again, just sort of, no, move on. I'm sorry, guys, that's not good enough. And even, I'm again curious because I know there are people from the Reform Party who do like to put their 2 cents in my videos every so often. But, well, what do you reckon? What do you think to Beth's question?
And party. Next question, please, Richard.
Sorry.
Next question.
And also point out, he says, next question, Richard, as though it's Richard's authority to decide which questions can and cannot be answered. That does not seem like a very constitutional response, if you ask me, or even a very democratic one. But then again, maybe well, let's move on.
What do you say to your colleagues
I've given the answer, Beth.
who feel really let down this morning?
I've given my answer. Next question, please.
Millions of people who trusted the Tories to deliver Brexit, to reduce immigration, they're the people who count, the voters, not the representatives in Parliament. That is the difference. We focus on the concerns of the British people.
Okay, let me put. What's your
No, I
message
think
to Mr.
we're going to move
Sunak
next.
then?
We're going down the
He hasn't answered my question.
Lee, we've spoken a lot here about protest, but
I feel so bad for Beth as well. You know, to be honest, if I was Beth right now, I would have just taken my stuff and left, because I think that would, personally, I think that would be more than enough. If they're not willing to answer that, then what exactly are they going to answer to? You know what I mean?
what will your first domestic policy be for reform? And we've got teacher strike potentially in September. How will you handle that in Parliament?
Let me put that, because on our website you've got our contract with you, which is our equivalent of a manifesto, which sets out the whole... Yeah, but hang on, no. Lee is with us, and the key thing about that, we've touched on all the other things, the key thing is you've got to make work pay.
Oh, actually, no, okay, so since I know Richard is trying to weasel his way around this, I will actually do this, because, as I've mentioned this before, my dad has worked 40 years in education. My dad knows less now. Well, no, okay, maybe that's not the right way to put it. Okay, let me try that again. My dad has forgotten more than I think maybe Richard will even know, because let me tell you something right now, ladies and gentlemen. I've read over and over again the Reform Party's policies on education. They're willing to suppress things like about things like race theory, and goodness knows what else that would entail, or what else that would be added if stuff like not actually learning about why it's important to get along with each other. It makes me also wonder whether or not the idea of like RS classes would be suppressed on principle. Nothing else, just principle. But again, how exactly you could do this for Catholic schools is a question that I don't really think Lee Anderson can answer, or Richard Tice for that matter, or anybody who would even step up as being like education secretary for the Reform Party. And then, of course, well, there's, again, I could get into the things about what the policies are about teaching children about that there are only two genders, and how you need to remove all of this nonsense about what a child would feel when it comes to things like gender and who they are, and suggesting that it's more important for children to know how to read or write, despite the fact that schools are already concerned with that already, and have done for hundreds, well, at least 300 years at this point. And also that they drop the words common sense like over and over and over again, as though they're going to pull that card on it, as though they know more about education than the people who actually worked all their lives in schools. So let's give Richard the benefit of the doubt. Let's see exactly how he words this, or how he rationalizes the fact that you shouldn't really be working in a school if you, or knowing what goes on in a school if you've never actually worked in one.
And that's why the key economic policy of lifting the starting point to pay income tax to £20,000 from £12,500, that will make a massive difference to many, many people on modest incomes, on low pay. That will be the biggest single factor, and that's absolutely essential.
I've signed up to the key pledges of the Reform Party, so it's on the website, Eva. Feel free to go, we'll have a look and say, yeah, Lee Anderson agrees with all of that.
There have been plenty of reports that money was offered in previous attempts to get Lee over. Can you confirm that absolutely no cash has exchanged hands ahead of today? And Lee, do you have a message for any of your old Tory MP mates who might be wavering in two minds, thinking of defecting, upset with Mr Sunak? What's your pitch to get them to cross the floor with you?
Well, so to be clear, no money has been offered at all, so we'll clear that one up straight away. And message to my colleagues is... Look,
did anyone notice how Lee Anderson didn't think to actually look the person in the face by saying it? I don't know. I just want to do that just one more time.
What's your pitch to get them to cross the floor with you?
Well, so to be clear, no money has been offered at all, so we'll clear that one up straight away.
Okay, technically he does, I think, look in the direction of the person, but he doesn't do it for very long. It looks, I don't know, something between guilt and shiftiness, if you ask me. But again, eyes are very, very expressive things, ladies and gentlemen. Windows to the souls, as they say.
And message to my colleagues is... Look, it's a sad day that I'm leaving my colleagues, but if I'm honest, this time next year they'll be sat on the same benches as me.
Chris Mason, BBC.
Thank you, Chris Mason, BBC News. We've seen in the past, Mr Anderson, defectees from the Conservative Party trigger a by-election. We saw it with Douglas Carswell, we saw it with Mark Reckless joining the predecessor party of UKIP. Why not do the same right now?
Well, you're talking about Mark Reckless. It'd be pretty reckless of me to suggest a by-election when we could have a general election in May. There's your answer.
Why not go for it, though?
Because it costs a fortune.
I think actually millions of people are sick of parliamentarians wasting taxpayers' cash. We've got a general election within weeks or months. Actually, what we've got to focus is getting the message out. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, if the Reform Party knew what they were getting into, probably they would suggest that actually waiting several months before Rishi Sunak calls on a general election might actually work in the Reform Party's favour. Because, and one thing I am going to say about the Reform Party is that if ever there was a time to gain as much support through their policies as humanly possible, that's just, it straight up would be the time, because you need to start getting people on your side. You don't just spring out from nowhere and then just to the turn of a high-profile name like Lee Anderson joining your party and thinking that you immediately go to call on an election almost immediately. It's not really going to work like that.
To the British people about the choices and the option. And that's the joy of democracy. Different parties,
Harry.
Different views. That's great.
Harry Cole.
Harry.
Thank you, Mr Anderson. Just a few weeks ago, you described Mr Tice as a pound-shot Nigel Farage whose reforms answered Diane Abbott. What's made you change your mind? And question to Mr Tice, do you agree with what Mr Anderson said about the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan? Do you stand by those comments and you're happy to share a platform with him?
Look, absolutely, and I think millions of British people endorse the concerns and sentiments of what Lee was saying, which is that we are sick and tired of our streets being taken over by these pro-Hamas, extremist, anti-Semitic people and Islamist extremists. That's the concerns that people want to hear about. And in terms of pence, pounds...
I mean, I know, I may be shooting in the dark for saying this, but hear me out. Why is it absolutely is it possible to be pro Palestine and to be anti-Islam and to be anti-Islam? Could it not be or anti-Semitic? Is it not possible to just be pro one and not be the anti or the negative? Because I know I've been saying for a long time now anyway, is that in the run-up to the election, well, to be honest, for the last 3 years, I've saying that the current feeling of the moment in this country is not to be pro-Labour, but to be anti-Tory. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, it's not good. It's not going to work like that. If people want actually to get rid of the Tories and their 14-year reign of terror, is that you've got to be pro something else. It doesn't just work for being anti one organisation but not pro another. Because, well, what's the point of being anti something in the first place if you're not going to show particular favours towards another party entirely? That's my question, and the thing that I feel like it's the sort of thing that kind of needs to be brought into place, because, well, with what Richard Tice says in terms of agreeing with Lee Anderson's comments about criticising Sadiq Khan and how he thinks that streets are entirely being overrun and all the rest of that jargon, the only question I want to ask is that, well, what side exactly do we take? What do you think they're just going to stop? Do you think that protesting is just going to stop just because one person who happens to be the head of a party disagrees with it? Again, Michael Gove said nearly 2 weeks ago that he was accusing people who were marching on the side of Palestine were subverting democracy. And could it be argued that's kind of what Richard Tice is trying to do right now by subverting democracy, by saying that what people can and cannot do? Again, some people may agree with it, may not, but it's within their interests and it's within their rights to protest how they feel. And again, if they're not actually hurting anybody, if they're not actually doing anything destructive, then you know what, these issues start, where does that leave it?
Pounds, I tell you what, maybe if you look after the pence, the pounds look after themselves.
Yeah. And also on that point, Harry, somebody described you as a pound shop Glen Owen. And I didn't argue with that.
And, well, that just about confirms, in my mind, the other little elephant in the room about this this whole conference. It's the Lee Anderson just openly insulting journalists. Is that, well, that's the level of maturity we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. Just childish insults just thrown each other, thinking that Lee Anderson and Richard Tice have it one up on everybody else because they can do that sort of thing just because they can. I don't really... Well, actually, I do know what to say to that, is that if this is their attempt to try and convince me that I should be voting reform, once again, it's not working. And I know people say that I look like a lefty, and people think that I look like just like a lefty tosser, even somebody with a face that is even left wing, which is I don't even know where to begin with that. But is this, you know what, again, if you're trying to convince me, is this the best you can do? Is this what I want to be supporting? Are these the type of people I want to be voting for? Are these the type of people who have my constitutional interest at heart? Are these somebody who have my personal interest at heart? Are these the sort of people who are even going to act upon the interests of the people who are absolutely in their interests? You tell me.
Harry Horton, ITV News. Lee Anderson, you've had 3 political parties now in 6 years. How long are you planning to stick with reform? And why should people trust you, given that clearly your own political beliefs seem to be changing? And Richard, for you, how many of the Tory MPs are you talking to? And realistically, do you think any more will switch to reform before the general election?
Well, first of all, my political beliefs have never changed at all. I believe in I think politics is quite simple. You listen to what people...
You know, I'll just say this again. You know what? His beliefs haven't changed. It's just he'll just decide where he can go. So really, it's not about any party whatsoever. It's just about what Lee Anderson wants. So he's basically even just shot the Reform Party in the foot by saying this. So it's not really about reform. It's not even really about what the interests of the people who want reform are. It's about what Lee Anderson wants at the moment. And at this moment, he wants to be on the side of Richard Tice. But again, give it 12 months when Lee Anderson is out of a job again, and he probably even has to go to the Independents, or tries to restart the BNP, or goodness knows what else he would do.
People have to say, then you go to that place and carry it out, and it's that simple, and we're not doing that. And I think this party will allow me to speak on behalf of not just my constituents who are furious with what's happening in that place, but millions of people up and down the country. And like I said before, my country has to come first, and I'm scared of what we're doing at the moment in this country. We are giving this country away, and it's got to stop.
And to answer your questions, I will be surprised if there are not more other MPs from other parties who don't join reform before the general election. Could be wrong if it's called a week on Friday, but otherwise I'll be surprised.
Labour.
Harry Gibbon, Channel News. Thank you. If I understood your new party leader when he was doing the introduction, he said Britain's broken and the Tories broke it. Do you agree?
I think every party's broke it. It's not just the Tory party, it's the Labour Party, it's Parliament, Gary. It's the whole of Parliament.
Said, is it?
Oh, you listen to what I have to say. It's the whole of Parliament, the whole system, the whole democratic system in this country is rigged. It doesn't represent, really, what people are saying. I live in...
So, once again, I have to interject, ladies and gentlemen, is that did Lee Anderson arrive at this before or after he got suspended? You tell me.
The real world. That's a place called Ashfield, Gary. It's a Junction 28 if you ever want to pop in. When I go into the pubs and shops and walk down the street at the weekend, people are talking like me. They're talking like Lee Anderson. They're not talking like you lot or the MPs in there. They live in the real world, and they've got real concerns about the cost of living, about migration, legal migration, illegal migration, stuff like that. They're talking about, the crime on the streets, the shoplifting, the fact that you can't get a police officer turn up to your house if it gets burgled. The fact that people are pulling their own teeth out. You can't get a GP appointment. So I'm here to speak up for them, not for you.
Well, can I just also make up... I'm going to make an interesting case, ladies and gentlemen, and see what you guys think of this. When was the last time that Lee Anderson had ever had his house burgled? When was the last time Lee Anderson had to pull his own teeth out because he couldn't see a dentist? When was the last time Lee Anderson was in a position where he could sympathize or empathize with people who went through similar turmoils? When was the last time Lee Anderson was ever in debt? When was the last time Lee Anderson was the subject to bullying in the workplace because of who he was? When was the last time Lee Anderson worked at a business or a job in which workers' rights were heavily suppressed? What exactly does Lee Anderson know about public life if he's never had to go through these sorts of trials and tribulations that working class people have to go through? Because you know what? It's not a black and white issue. It's not we're right and they're wrong. It's not about we are right and the whole system of parliament is wrong. There's right and wrong on all sides, ladies and gentlemen, but I refuse to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that Lee Anderson stands as sort of like this paragon of virtue, that he can do no wrong and therefore should not be questioned, and therefore Lee Anderson can dictate to people where the real world exists. Because, never mind Ashfield, but what about other places in the country? What about Cardiff, or Liverpool, or Coventry, or Derby, or Birmingham, or the whole of the West Midlands, or the whole of Yorkshire, from Leeds to Sheffield to what about like Falmouth or Cornwall, or Exeter, or Kent, or the whole of Shropshire, the whole of Hertfordshire, the whole of the North East, Northumberland, Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, you know what, Cumbria, you know what I mean? What about the rest of the country? What about everything outside of Ashfield? Because again, the whole of civilization doesn't just stop and end from the centre of Parliament all the way to Ashfield, or all the way to Watford, or even as far north as Edinburgh. You know what? It's a huge thing, and I don't exactly know how you can accompany the idea that it all stops and starts wherever we feel like the points are. I think this is like it's similar to when Boris Johnson was in charge and he was systematically being accused of moving the goalposts when he felt like it. And you could even say Lee Anderson's almost doing the same. He could just decide when and where he can score his own goals.
Andy Bell, 5 News. Lee Anderson, haven't you just made it much harder for your Conservative colleagues who are fighting to try and hang on to their seats? Haven't you just helped Keir Starmer win the next election? Do you feel comfortable with that? Somebody,
Andy, has to make a stand. And I said it last week, there's 650 MPs in that building over there, and if not one can speak out for the good of this country, then, quite frankly, what's the point in being there? I have to live with my conscience. My conscience is clear. When I go and see my parents yesterday on Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, Mother, and they say to me, Lee, you need to join Reform. This country needs saving. We're absolutely fed up with what's happening on the streets of London. We're fed up with what's happening up and down the country. We're just fed up. We need change. If my parents are saying that, then I can sleep well at night.
I've got a very simple message. Vote Tory, get Starmer. Vote Reform, get Reform.
Adam Payne from Politics Home. A question for Lee Anderson. Lee, both Richard and Reform's Deputy Leader Ben Habib have talked about...
This might be the last time I have to pause this, but I'm just going to replay this part once again and just let it out.
To make a stand, and I said it last week, there's 650 MPs in that building over there, and if not one can speak out for the good of this country, then, quite frankly, what's the point in being there? I have to live with my conscience. My conscience is clear. When I go and see my parents yesterday on Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, Mother, and they say to me, Lee, you need to join Reform. This country needs saving.
Wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Voting Reform is not saving. It's not going to save this country, and let me tell you why. My great great uncle died in 1941. He was part of the Navy, and his entire ship was destroyed by a German U-boat. The same German U-boat we refer to as Das Boot, interestingly enough. And before Lee Anderson can say anything otherwise, or before anyone else could say anything otherwise, my great-great-uncle, the great Johnny Lynn, he died to save this country. He died to defend the rights and the freedoms of this country, for my rights and for the rights of you watching at home. You know what? Again, it could also be for your own your grandparents, your great uncles, people who fought in wars to protect the rights of this country. And Lee Anderson stands there as bold as brass to suggest that he's going to do the same, or he's anywhere up to the level of Johnny Lynn, is absolutely the most borderline, perhaps the most insulting thing I've ever heard in my life. Because you know what? In my mind, nobody is ever going to beat Johnny Lynn. He was pretty much the only man I've as far as, being, related to, who probably has like a bigger set of balls than anyone else, because he actually fought in a war. He died fighting for the freedoms of our country. And Lee Anderson thinks that this is going to save this country, or that we're at war, is just you couldn't make this up. But as it turns out, and I said this before, there are some depths that some people will just sink to because it thinks that makes them look good. But it doesn't, ladies and gentlemen. This stuff it's not clever, and it's a complete slap in the face to the poor men and women who gave their lives, fighting, the Nazis, or fighting either the Russians, the Germans, the Italians. It's a complete slap in the face, against actual monsters out there in this world, in the form of like Stalin or Mussolini or Hitler. And you're really trying to tell me that you're going to emerge as our shining prince? No, I'm done. I'm done with this. This is like out of hand.
We're absolutely fed up with what's happening on the streets of London. We're fed up with what's happening up and down the country. We're just fed up. We need change. If my parents are saying that, then I can sleep well at night.
I've got a very simple message. Vote Tory, get Starmer. Vote Reform, get Reform.
Adam Payne from Politics Home. A question for Lee Anderson. Lee, both Richard and Reform's Deputy Leader Ben Habib have talked about on several occasions how they want to obliterate the Conservatives at the next general election. Do you share that objective?
And just one more thing I want to say is that my great-great-uncle was only 41 when he died.
It's not an objective which is at the top of my agenda. My vision for this party is to win seats like Ashfield. My priority is winning Ashfield and places like Ashfield. Places that I think have been let down by my old party. Boris said in 2019 that the people in places like Ashfield had lent the vote, and they had people like my parents and my family and my friends voted Conservative for the very first time with high expectations. And the promises have not been delivered. And, I have to be with a party that puts this country first, rather than their mates at the tea parties and clinking their champagne glasses or wherever they go over the evening, scared to upset people. Well, I'm not scared to upset a few people, ruffle a few feathers, but you know what? I invite any of you, mind you, you're normally there up in Ashfield the weekend, a lot of you, especially at Guardian, knocking on 1,000 doors to try and get a bad comment out of me, and you're going to struggle with that one, by the way. Next question.
Don't worry, Lee. I think you've done just a fantastic job yourself. So that's basically all I wanted to get out, ladies and gentlemen. And just for the record, before I sign off, is that you would have thought that, again, Lee Anderson just seemed to be under the impression that he knows that people are going to be very critical against this, and as opposed to actually trying to quell or even turn these negative thoughts into positives, Lee Anderson has just reverted to what he always does and somehow manages to make the situation even worse for himself by retaining to this complete laissez-faire attitude of Lee against the world. But it's only because Lee chose that. he chose his side and he has to stick with that. And as much as people are going to stick to their comments and how they're going to view Lee Anderson is going to be paramount, because, like I said before, and many, many times, ladies and gentlemen, you pay the consequences for the choices you make. And sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, there is no such thing as good or bad. There are only consequences. So we'll have to wait and see how these things stack up. And I cannot wait to talk to you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.